Welcome back, pro wrestling fans. Welcome back, IWC, to Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel, here for Chaos Corner. It's your old buddy, the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy. And I tell it like it is. I'll say that to say this. Here for another special edition of Story Time. That's right, live to tape 25 feet below the surface of the earth. Sit back and relax here on the weekend and enjoy Story Time. It's gonna be, as the kids say, a banger. It's gonna be lit. Shout out to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because if he's for us, no one else can be against us. Stay mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit. Big shout out to my two moderators, the OTS Tribal Queen and my brother from another mother, Austin Nance. I certainly appreciate you guys. Drop an elbow on that like button, share, subscribe, leave a comment. This is part 2 of Story Time for this weekend of July 13th and July 14th. I hope everyone is staying situationally aware out there, head on a swivel with all the insanity of going on in 2024 into 2025. From the government to the border invasion to the environment and everything else in between, and the economy and so on and so forth. Stay safe. Stay with like-minded people, and make sure that you look out for each other. That's the best thing you can do. Open up that good book. I just want to put out that PSA, and we're going to jump right into it, fans. I am reading this and reviewing this at the same time as you are here with me on Chaos Corner. Business is about to pick up. Let's get into it. Jim Ross, good old JR, as I said in part 1, Jim Ross in the middle 90s was one of the guys I sent my promotional tape to try to get hired by the WWF back at that time. I was talking about in part 1 in the opening monologue, my relationship with some of these stars, veterans, rookies, young lions. You guys know my history. If you're here on the channel, you're one of my almost 1,500 subscribers, over 3,000 videos, coming up on almost 1 million total views. You guys know what's going on this channel and my history and my link and my connection. Anywhere on a low side to 3,500 people a week to 25,000 people a week tuning into this channel. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. What would I say, man? Here we go. Business is about to pick up here on Storytime. November 26th, 1988. Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors, World Championship Wrestling, TBS Studios, Atlanta, Georgia. Here's the headline. They're trying to put his eye out. They're sticking that spike right in his eye, to quote Jim Ross. Here we go, fans. Again, I just purchased this. 50 years of wrestling, 50 unforgettable calls. We're going to go through with a series of stories here through the eyes of Jim Ross, perhaps one of the greatest play-by-play announcers of all time. He's on my Mount Rushmore. Gordon Solie, Lance Russell, Jim Ross, Gorilla Monsoon. The list goes on and on. Leave your thoughts on your favorite play-by-play. And then we can even go to color commentary. Jesse Ventura, Bobby the Brain Heenan. I mean, there's many of them out there, just to throw a few out there. Mean Gene Okerlund at times. So let's get into it. We're only 4 minutes in. These are going to be shorter stories. I'm going to try to keep it anywhere from 15 minutes to a half an hour. Keep everyone's attention and push out the content. This is my much-needed distraction, my stress reliever, my love, my passion, my motivation, and I hope I can provide that for you fans. That's why I'm here. Not only for me, but for you as well. And again, I would appreciate you getting us into the algorithm. I rate that button, like I said. Drop a note, live chat, email me, inbox me, go to the community page. Say something, man. Here we go. Blood has always been a tool used to heighten storylines in wrestling. Hell, I was even involved in stories myself where my blood was drawn to further heighten a program. I didn't cut myself. I let Stone Cold Steve Austin do the honors because I had no idea what I was doing, to quote Jim Ross. But like all storytelling tools, you want to make sure you're using the right one for the job, or its effects are lessened, or downright useless. I can agree with that. And depending on what company and what era, the frequency of allowing wrestlers to cut their own flesh to draw real blood has varied hugely. In other words, blading. And I'll give you my insights on blading as we go on, because I have bladed many times in the past as a pro wrestling manager. You guys know that. Over 3 decades. Booked over 100 times a year. Came out 2 and 3 times every show I was on. That's over 200 matches a year that I was involved in. Taking the fucking bumps too, which a lot of you people out there can't say you've never stepped into a ring that are in this podcast world that put out your opinions and thoughts and views. I respect you. I'm no better than anyone else, but just different. I give you a different viewpoint, an insider's view. Both sides. Remember that, and that's why you're here. And I say it every time. You guys, if you're a regular here, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. In the past, it wasn't uncommon for the front row to go home with some wrestler's blood on them. But now, with all we know about blood-borne viruses and just having more common sense, the use of blood has lessened a lot. In 1987, I was ringside calling a brutal match between my dear friend Dr. Death Steve Williams and Big Bubba for the Universal Wrestling Federation World Heavyweight title, where it got real bloody, real fast. And I remember looking down at the monitor doing my job only to sense them getting closer to where I was. I had recently started wearing glasses, and I made the mistake of glancing up just in time to get a Jackson Pollock-like smattering of Bubba's blood right across both lenses. I still to this day can feel how weird it was to wear another man's blood on my face as I sat there calling his match. It was a different era, with very little known about the associated risks of something like that, so I didn't know how dangerous that could have been. I just wiped my face, took off my glasses, and kept going. During the anything goes attitude era of the 1990s at the WWF, Vince had a soft spot for guys who felt they needed or wanted to do color for their angles. So it was an item on the menu for a long time there. Back then, we found ourselves in a position where we felt as a company and as individual performers that we needed to do whatever we could to keep our show and brand edgy and attitude-irish. We knew it was that approach that kept the money coming in and had raised the company to heights it had never experienced, making more millionaires backstage in the locker room than I'd ever seen before. Now, it certainly wasn't all down to blood, but there were some guys who felt having that open palette to create with this what was essential to preserving that edge. But as time moved on and the culture began to change, once again, the sponsors got involved. And they didn't want their brands associated with blood and guts. WWE at the time I worked there was moving past getting color, WWF, and being overly sexual, shocking, or attitudinal to becoming a more family-friendly brand and show. That meant that blood was used very, very sparingly. And that's what I talk about all the time. If everybody does it and everybody uses it, you take away from the top stars, you take away from the main event, and it loses its effectiveness. Just like with all these different moves and all these different finishers that aren't used, or people doing all these different angles and doing the same storylines of blood or ladders or tables or just outside the ring. And then you're doing it in the next matches too. It takes away its effectiveness. That's why you have emotional investment, ring psychology, storytelling. It just lessens the effect. You guys know that if you know what the fuck I'm talking about. And that's the thing about blood anyway. If you don't overuse it, and again, it's the first time I'm reading this, so you can see JR and I are on the same page, because you know I'm no JR, okay, let me be humble there, but I do play-by-play, and I do color commentary currently for my home company at Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling, and I've been doing it for years, not to mention my in-ring experience and behind-the-stage experience being a pro wrestling manager, working on everything from storylines to matches to getting involved, and as I already said, and I'll say it again, taking a fucking bump. So just remember why you're here and the difference between this show and all the other podcasts that are out there in the IWC. I appreciate you guys, trust me, and I appreciate your opinion. And that's the thing about blood anyway, as I just said. If you don't overuse it, it can still be used for great dramatic effect. I like a match we had in AEW in 2021 between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, where blood was used to shock and get people talking, and mostly in a good way. The color red in that match helped highlight the violence and the aggression that both women had ended and put each other through, and what they endured. It was hugely effective. Listen, when it comes to Texas death matches, first blood matches, and other variations on that theme, the use of color as a creative medium is something I have no problem with whatsoever. As long as the wrestlers are okay with it and everybody is safe and tested. I say let it be an occasional cameo in our storytelling. JR, that's why he criticizes even the current product in AEW. You see how current that this book is. In 1988, I packed everything I owned into a Lincoln Continental and left Oklahoma as a newly divorced man and a newly hired broadcaster. I had neglected my home life in pursuit of my wrestling career, and it caught up to me and my then wife. I take full responsibility for that. It's one of the few things I wish I could go back and change in life, but all you can do is move forward. That's valid advice. Which is what I was attempting to do when I left my home state for a new role at Turner Broadcasting System, as they began to rebrand their newly acquired property, Jim Crockett Promotions, as World Championship Wrestling. So to recap, Georgia Championship Wrestling had sold their TBS time slot to the World Wrestling Federation, who sold it to Jim Crockett Promotions. You guys know the history and the story. Who bought the Universal Wrestling Federation, who ended up selling their company to Turner Broadcasting System. Round and round we go. Who proceeded to name their company after Georgia Championship Wrestling's old TV show, World Championship Wrestling. And that's why you come here, to learn things, to learn history, research, facts, so that when you leave here and go to a barbecue or a family event or your next venue or the water cooler or a bar or a pub or a tavern, you can add to the conversation with actual knowledge and historical facts that you learned fucking here. This is what I present as my product. I know I'm a little aggressive. I'm drinking a sugar-free Red Bull. Cut me some slack. I appreciate it. After McMahon came onto the scene in 1982, Jim Crockett, a several-time NWA chairman, had tried to grow his territory nationally too, which caused him to neglect his core fan base in the Carolinas while running half-empty shows coast to coast in a blind effort to expand before McMahon got too big. Crockett tried in vain to use the once powerful might of the NWA to corral other promotions together in an effort to stand more united against the WWF's rapid and aggressive expansion. But due to disputes over money and who got what, when, those alliances and pacts soon fell apart, typical of this industry and business. Crockett tried in vain. He certainly did. The fall of Jim Crockett Promotions happened across a few different areas of the company at the same time. Jim Crockett Promotions was spending well outside its means on jets and limousines, while the company's creative squandered top storylines that could have driven it forward. And in 1988, when Jim Crockett, under threat of bankruptcy, TBS, the parent company of Ted Turner's Superstation, bought it for under $10 million. Let that marinate. So after all the territory carnage and closures across the country, it looked like two viable national companies were left standing. And I was going to be lucky enough to broadcast for one of them, which ended up being all of them with Jim Ross. Not too long after I arrived, the newly reshaped World Class Championship Wrestling wanted to get their momentum going with something that would resonate and grab people's attention. Their booker was the legendary American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. And you guys know that I also have a history with Dusty Rhodes. Once again, I'm being humble, but I'm repeating why you're here, and if not, why you should tell people to be here. For my connections, who I am, what I know. Not any better, as I always say, just different, just unique. I'm telling it like it is, whether you fucking like it or don't. And I apologize for the cussing. I mean, I really do. It just happens. But I have to get my point across. And sometimes that's what happens. You know I have heat with this mechanical bitch over here, right? Not to get off the subject. I should unplug the bitch, but it's been an ongoing feud here at Chaos Corner with myself and Alexa. Play Tropical Thunderstorm sounds. She finally listened for once. Pardon the interruption here on Chaos Corner and Story Time. Dusty was feeling the heat to come up with something big and fresh and bold to separate WCW from their rival, the WWF. Now, I kind of figured the second I saw Dusty on my monitor that day wearing a white shirt that red was sure to follow, because red and white go together in our business like peanut butter and jelly. But even I had no idea just how red that white was about to get. In a small soundstage in the belly of TBS, Dusty rolled into the ring looking for a fight. And by God, Road Warrior Animal was quick out of the dressing room to give him just what he wanted. Oh, what a rush! The crowd picked up immediately in reaction to the sudden acts of aggression taking place in front of their very eyes. Punches and kicks flew everywhere, and the people loved it. Road Warrior Animal and the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. It's like a street fight here. I have all that stuff down here in the vault of Chaos Chronicles on VHS. You guys that follow along with my other episodic YouTube series called Flashback, you know that. I was a big tape trader, plus I taped my own stuff back in the 80s. We know that the VHS was invented in 1976 or 77. I have tapes from the 70s and 80s into the 90s, all here on VHS, including all the stuff I'm reviewing and talking about here on Storytime. And if you go to the episodes on Flashback, you will see that. What a series that is, am I right? And it was just like a street fight until Animal's tag team partner Hawk jumped in the ring and made it a 2-on-1 affair. Dusty was quickly overpowered and outnumbered, so much so that Animal was able to break away from the brawl to remove one of the large steel spikes from his entrance gear shoulder pads and whack the Dream right in the head with it. Dusty went down hard, and then Animal turned the Dream right into the camera and stabbed the spike directly into the Dream's face. I remember it like yesterday. This is 1988. What am I at that point in my life? 25 years old? Let that marinate. The old man brand, the over 50 demo god. Dusty went down hard. As I said, stabbed in the face by the Animal. They tried to blind him. They stuck that spike right in his eye. Blood poured from Dusty's face and covered his white shirt as the crowd looked on, genuinely horrified at what they saw. It was certainly the shocking and headline-grabbing moment that Dusty was looking for, except not for the reason he wanted. TBS standards and practices had made all of us aware long before the angle happened that the company didn't want any violence that led to blood to occur on their screens, and that there'd be consequences if it did. Rhodes is bleeding. You can hear him screaming. Even back then, as I was calling it, I couldn't figure out why Dusty did it. He was shrewd as an operator, as the business at that time, and fully knew the consequences of violating such a concrete policy. But I guess Dream was a classic example of an old school guy who saw blood as being as fundamental to a main event storyline as rings and ropes were. I'm guessing he felt that if he could spark an angle big and ratings grabbing enough, the brass on top, who knew nothing about the wrestling business, would see the reward and figure the road to get there was justified. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Instead, Dusty was fired, persona non grata. The angle was so shocking and graphic that all the higher-ups in Turnerland saw the clip too. So just as I arrived to WCW, my good friend Dusty Rhodes was gone. And the booking in that company never really recovered. Dream isn't with us anymore, but I can't help but imagine him somewhere in heaven, cutting promos with a glint in his eye, if you will, because of all that white around him. Now, if that's not a story, I don't know what the fuck is. So fans, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with more story time. We are going to continue with this as a series as we leave here November 26th, 1988, Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors from the TBS studios in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.